Hi, welcome. This is TechNet YouTube. I am Catriona. I'm the new media technician here, so hi. I'm really looking forward to meeting everyone. For the first years coming in, I'm also new, so we're in the same boat there. And for the ones coming back into second year, please be nice to me, and I'll be nice to you. Today I am going to be doing a Lightroom tutorial, which you can find on the TechNet page if you need. All the guides are there. But yeah, today I'm going to be talking you through Lightroom and the basic things you need to know for your coursework and for life in general. So yeah, let's get going. Lightroom is a powerful photo editor. It has similarities to Photoshop if you know how to use Photoshop, but it's also unique and has its own benefits as well. It allows you to control sort of key settings such as white balance, contrast, detail, and a lot more, color, loads of different things in your photography. Professional photographers mostly use this software all over the world, and it is a go-to for a lot of people for general photo editing. I'm going to talk you through the basic tools of Lightroom, maybe a little bit more in detail about it, and I'm going to teach you how best to utilize things and how best to edit photos. But a lot of it is about experimenting and about your own preferences and what you want to do to your different photos. I encourage you just to go on, have a look, see what's happening, and just have a bit of fun with it, because it's a really fun tool to use and to get to know. So firstly, the difference between Lightroom and Photoshop. They have a lot of similarities. They have a lot of similar buttons, which is very useful because you can, transfer your skills between each of them. Lightroom is non-destructive, so you can always get back to the original photo, and you can make multiple edits of the same photo. And it's also software that's built to store, sort, and enhance photos. That's its main purpose. Whereas if you look at Photoshop, that is a tool where you can create your own images from scratch, and you can make limitless adjustments. You can do literally anything to a photo on Photoshop, as well as work with the multiple layers. A lot of it is personal preference, which one you want to use, but sometimes if it's just a basic color correction or some sort of enhancement to a photo, Lightroom is a lot easier to navigate than Photoshop, so I would highly recommend jumping onto that one first. It's always nice to have a working knowledge of both softwares. So let's start from the beginning. A very good place to start. If we open Lightroom Classic, so we don't want to open normal Lightroom that's on the Creative Cloud, that's not what we use here. If you are using normal Lightroom at home, that's fine, you can still watch this tutorial. The software is pretty similar, more or less the same, so it's still going to be helpful for you. But like I said, we're going to use Lightroom Classic here at the college, so this tutorial will help you when you're editing photos here. Okay, so the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to ask you to create a catalogue. So we're going to start by clicking create a new catalogue here. So what you need to do is store it onto the computer that you're using. I know this isn't the most ideal thing, but Lightroom doesn't like when you store it into your own server. So we're going to save it onto this computer in the Windows C file, and then if you just create a new folder, Catriona Lightroom, and we're just going to pop it in there. So you will only be able to access it from the same computer, which hopefully isn't going to be a problem because you are going to be using the same computers in the edit suite all year because of COVID things. If you want, you can bring in your own USB drive and you can save it onto there. And then file name, we're just going to call it practice for now. Create. Okay, so I've signed in. It should just be your college email and account. If you have any issues, just come and ask one of us and we'll figure it out for you. And that should just happen on the first time that you open Lightroom, and then it should be fine. Okay, so let's start by importing some photos. So we press import down here. And then what we're going to do is go into the media and film drive and then on student resources, where if you go down into tutorials and then Lightroom, you'll find some lovely photos. So I'm just going to import all of them at the moment. So all photos is selected, but you can deselect here, and then I'm going to import them. There we go. And we've got our lovely images here. Next thing we want to do is up here, we've got something called the Develop tab. So we want to come out of the library and into Develop, and this is where we can edit our photos. So here you can organize your photos into a collection by pressing the plus button and create collection. You can name it whatever it is. So practice, create, and then you can put any images that you want into this collection. This is a really nice way of organizing your footage if you have loads and loads and loads of photos. Okay, so what we're going to do is double click the first image that we would like to edit. If we go for this guy, and just make sure you're in the Develop tab. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to press YY here, and then you can also press it on your keyboard, the letter Y, so you can compare the original image with what you're editing. This is really useful because sometimes you don't realize how much you've done to an image, or how extreme something is if you're not comparing it to what it used to look like. You can also press Shift and Y, and it will do this, so it will have a before and after side by side, sort of overlapped. Or you can press the backward slash button and it will show you the before and after. So let me just make a quick adjustment so you can see. It will show you the before and after like that. So down here is your reel where you can see all the images that you've imported. Here you can import more photos. Here is where you're going to look at the image, and over here is where you can make all your edits. So the general rule for Lightroom, or one that we like to stick to, is start from the very top of the editing panel up at the histogram and work your way down, and then you can always go back and change things after you've done the things you want to do. The histogram shows the level of exposure, the shadows, highlights, whites, blacks, all that kind of thing, anything to do with the lighting of the photo essentially. Over on the right hand side is where you'd find the whites, highlights, exposure, and then on the left hand side is the shadows and the blacks. You'll see that if I turn the exposure up, it'll go towards the right. If I turn the exposure down, it'll go towards the left. That's essentially what it is showing you. A useful tool is something called clipping. If you turn on these arrows here, show highlight clipping and show shadow clipping. So we've got the image here, and you'll see now that if I bring the exposure up like so, you get these red marks that come up on the photo. This is just showing you where the photo is blown out and overexposed. And then if we do the opposite, you'll see that these blue marks come up, and that is just where the shadows are under detailed. So that is a really useful tool to have on, just in case you can't really see what is happening with the shadows and highlights. The technology can show you instead. The next thing we're going to look at are the filter and brush tools. So these buttons here can be used to make small adjustments to certain parts of the photo. So you can do something very, very specific to a small area of the photo. First box here, this is the crop. So your basic crop here, like that. And if you press O on your keyboard, you can go through different types of crop lines and guides. They can be really useful for certain types of photos, and if you want to get a bit more invested in how photos look, there's the fun spiral, the golden spiral there. This one will show you what the image will look like at different crop sizes, so you can kind of make your way through and see what they do. And if you use the angle, you can get it to rotate like so. The cool thing about the angle tool is you can use this straighten tool and you can find a straight edge, which this photo doesn't have any, but imagine there was a horizon. You could follow the horizon and the image will tilt accordingly. So the next tool along here is the spot removal, and this is a tool in which you can take something out of the photo. It's similar to the clone stamp in Photoshop if you're familiar with that. So you can adjust the size of the brush just here, dragging it along, and you can see the brush size gets bigger. It can get really big, it can get really small, and the good thing here is you can zoom in on a specific part, and if you want to get rid of something, say this little speck here, And what it does is it will find another part of the photo. So the bolder circle here is where it's copying from. And it will just replace what you've clicked on with the other part of the photo, which is really fun. So what we're going to do is take out this plane trail in the sky. So I'm just going to adjust the size to about that. And what you can do with the spot removal tool is you can draw over the area that you want to get rid of. It doesn't just have to be a spot. You can do a line, you can do whatever shape you want. And the software will find another area of the image that it will copy. So this is where we've drawn over, and this is the copied bit of the photo. So the next three buttons here are pretty similar, kind of do the same thing. They are just different shapes, so you can use it for your different needs. This one is a rectangle, so we'll start here. It's called the graduated filter, and what it does is it creates a rectangle across your image. So we can do a nice diagonal in line with the building there, and you can then change things in that specific highlighted area which you've selected. So let's say the exposure, so you'll see that the top left corner is now darker than the original image. You can also change the saturation, it gets more blue. You can change the temperature, we're going to make it a bit more purple, we're going to make it a bit more green. You can kind of do whatever you want with it, and that's really cool. It means you can highlight specific bits of the image using light. You can dull down a certain part of the image, it's really up to you. So what we're going to do is just make that a bit darker and make it a bit more blue, and then we've got this nice deep blue color. And you can change where the filter lies by dragging these lines here. So we're going to hit done. The radial filter is the same kind of thing, so let's go on to a different image actually, and we're going to make a radial filter over her face. What the radial filter does is everything outside the filter is affected by how you control it. So you can see that her face is now lit up more than the rest of her body and the rest of the image. You can invert this, so this little button down here means that what you do will happen inside the circle instead. So this is a nice way to highlight a face or your subject, or to create a subtle shadow somewhere. And then the brush tool, the adjustment brush, you can do the same thing as the other two buttons here, but it means that you can create your own path. So for instance, I would like her hair to be lighter, or, you know, this area of the photo to be lighter. So I'm going to just brush over by clicking down, and then I can use the exposure tool like this, or I can darken her hair completely like this, or I can change saturation, or I can take away the saturation. This is a nice way to take out the color in a certain area of the photo. And then the other thing that this tool can do, I'm just going to open a different photo here again. So I've got the brush on here, and what I'm going to do, and you can change the size down here as well. For instance, if I want one of these flowers to be a different color, I'm going to highlight that flower there, and you can just press this here. So we can just essentially just overlay with a different color, and it'll put a little bit of a filter over it like this, and you can also change the intensity. So we're now moving on to the basic tab here, and this is where you can change things like the lighting, the temperature, the white balance, all that kind of thing. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm just going to pop these next to each other, and the first thing we're going to do is get an accurate white balance. So you should have done the white balance in the camera, but not to worry if you didn't, or if it's not quite how you want it to look. We're going to use this little dropper here and find a white bit of the photo, so the background, and you'll see that it's changed to a more green blue, sort of a cooler photo, because this one is quite pink. If that's how you want it to look, then fab, but if not, you can change the temperature by using the temperature tools up here, and you can make it more green and pink along here. So maybe make it a little bit more pink. Down here we've got all our tone, so this is how you affect the lighting. I would recommend just playing around with all of these different things, seeing what they all do. A lot of them are very self-explanatory. Highlights is obviously the lighter bits of the photo. Shadows is the opposite, it's the darker bits of the photo. Whites and blacks are the extremes. But yeah, just play around with them, see what they do. So I'm just gonna up the contrast here. That's the other thing, guys. I would recommend moving this area of the screen with that arrow, because it means that you can use the toggles a bit more subtly, because very quickly you'll see how that gets overexposed. And the great thing about Lightroom is if you double click any of these toggles, they will just go back to 0. You can see there. And it means that you can get back to the original setting for each of these areas. Down here we've got the presence section. Here you can change the general vibrance and saturation of the photo, but I wouldn't worry about that just now because you can come on to color later. Clarity is always quite a nice tool, especially for portraits. It means that you can just get the details to stand out a little bit, but I don't think you need to go very far into the extremes for that one. Dehaze, imagine there was a layer of fog over the photo. It affects that, so it's either it takes away the fog or it adds it in here. Have a look at the tone curve if you want to. This is a way again to look at all the different lighting and how to affect it. So you can lift the shadows up or down a little bit there. Double click again to get back to the normal photo. You can lift the dark areas of the photo so it becomes lighter, all that kind of thing, and it will just give you a curve of where the lighting sits. So moving on to the color tab and the HSL tab, hue, saturation and luminance is what that stands for. So this is my favorite area of Lightroom. You can make some very cool adjustments using this, and it looks really pretty because it's a nice rainbow. There's two ways to use this. You can either go into the specific color, and this means that you can pick out the reds, yellows, etc., or you can use the HSL tab, which is what I'll work with just now. This means that you can see either the hue, saturation, the luminance of all the specific colors, or you can look at them all at the same time, like so, and it shows all the different things that are going on with the colors. So for instance, let's have a look. So we've got a lot of pink in here. We've got her pink eyeshadow, we've got her pink flower, but the software is probably going to see that as red. So if I adjust the red tab, so this is the hue means what kind of color it is going towards, so either towards a more pink or a more orange kind of color. So if you look at the flower, you can see the difference that's making. Just bear in mind that the red will also pick out tones in her skin, so you can see that it's now made her neck and bits of her face more red than they are. So remember that this doesn't just affect the most colorful thing, and pay attention to what's happening in the rest of the photo. Orange is generally skin tone for a white person. It probably will change the color of her skin, as you can see, and also her hair, because she's blonde. Just remember you can double click to get back to center there. So that's what hue does. If we go down to saturation, this is how intense the color appears in the photo. So again, looking at the red flower, you can see, and her lips and eyeshadow have become a lot more red, and if I take that away, it's going to make the entire photo a little bit colorless because it's taking out all the reds in the photo. I'm just going to make the greens, these leaves, I'm going to put them up to quite a high saturation just because I want them to pop a bit more. And if we look up here, you tend to find that even though a leaf might look green to you, it'll have yellow undertones in the photo. So often the yellow tab will affect the color of the leaves. You can also see that it's affecting the color of her hair. So it's going towards a more pinkish tone there, and then it's becoming a bit more green there. But I'm just going to lift the yellow a little bit and lift the green as well towards, yeah, I'm going to go towards a more blue green color, and then I think that makes these leaves pop a bit more. And then the next tab down we've got is luminance. So again, if we look at her skin tone in the orange tab, you can make a skin tone a bit darker if you go this way and a bit lighter if you go this way. If you're looking at the leaves, I can make them pop a little bit more by lightening. So what luminance does, it just creates shadows and light within a specific color on the image, which is quite cool. And I think you can make the most extreme differences maybe with the luminance tab. You just need to find what colors are affected with each tab. I'm just going to up the saturation a bit for red because I want the flowers to pop, and I also want it to be a bit more pink. There we go. And then I'm just going to up the luminance, and then it just lightens all those reds in the photo like so. The way that all looks when you're in the color section is literally hue, saturation and luminance, but just for the specific color. So yeah, it's whatever suits you, whatever suits the photo you're working on. Just have a play around. going to ignore split toning at the moment and go into detail. That's a zoomed in section, and you can move that around. Let's get her eye. That's always nice. Wow, that is zoomed in. So we can sharpen the image here, and you can also turn down the noise reduction, because sharpening the image often will create a lot of pixels and make it just look a bit weird, not right, even if you are sharpening it, because it's a little bit blurry. I would recommend just making sure that when you're taking the photos that everything is in focus, because that is the one thing that you can't correct in post-production. No matter how much you try and sharpen something, you'll see that it becomes red towards here, and that's kind of the warning zone. It means that the photo is going to look a bit strange if you sharpen it too much. You can kind of see in her eye now, it's all a bit jittery, I think I would describe that. There we go. But I'm gonna sharpen it a little bit. There we go. And tiny bit of noise reduction there. But yeah, just play around, see what you find. I'm gonna ignore lens corrections. Transform is how you move the image around within the set rectangle, essentially. So it's a way to rotate it, it's a way to move how things look. So I'd recommend putting on constrained crop here, because it means that it will stay within the path. And yeah, just have a play around, see what these all do. Most of these you would probably want to use in quite a subtle way, because they can be quite extreme. In the effects tab here, you can do two things. You can do the vignette, which I think that's how to pronounce it, vignette. You can create a light circle around the whole image, or a dark circle. So if you want to highlight your subject a little bit, you can create a bit of a dark shadow around the outside. You can change where the middle of that circle is, you can change how round it is, and you can change how extreme it is. So putting feather down to 0 will create a proper circle around the image. And then grain is a way that you can make it look a bit edgy, probably easier to see on a different kind of photo. I'm just going to make it a bit grainy, and then you can see it looks a bit sandy, and you can change how much you want that to happen. There we go. So that's all the different tabs there. If we go back to library, I'm just going to bring up a photo. So in the color area, let's look at the specific colors in his paint. So we've got the red. This is a good way to just change colors, essentially. So the red, let's turn that into a more pink color. Let's lift the luminance, and I think maybe drop the saturation a little bit. Just be careful, because it is affecting his skin tone as well. The yellow, it looks yellow, it's yellow to us. It might come up as green in the software, so just have a look and see if this affects anything. Oh, it does. So I can make that a more green color, or I can make it a bit more orangey, a bit more yellow orange. So I'm gonna change it into a green, turn down the saturation a little bit, and then if I drop the luminance, it becomes a bit of a darker green. If you go into green now, you can probably change, you can change how the paint looks even more. So this is quite an easy way to change specific colors if that's the only color in the image. And then if we just look at blue, lift the saturation here. I want to make it a bit more aqua, I think. Yeah, nice teal. And lift the luminance a little bit, I think. And then yeah, so if I now press the backward slash key, you can see the difference in the paint color, like so. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how to change an eye color. So if I look at this girl here, so we're just going to zoom in on her eye, and then what we're going to do is go back to the adjustment brush. So we're going to change the size down a little bit, because we want to get it to be about the size of the iris there. So what we're going to do is just paint the area of the eye that we want to change. You'll see that it's gone a bit of a lighter color. It might go red on your device. That's okay. It's not actually going red. It's just highlighting where you've put your brush stroke. So obviously there's a bit of her eye in here that's a bit too small. So I'm just going to put the size down a bit and paint a little bit more in here, trying to avoid the pupil. There we go, and that's basically her eye. So you can change all these here, but the quickest way to change something like an eye color or anything that you need to change color is to paint it like so, and then click on the color cross down here and then just pick out a color. So that's maybe a bit extreme, so we're going to go down a little bit. If I press done down here and then I zoom out, I can then see the difference that I've made. It's a bit extreme. Obviously you don't have to go as crazy as that, but that is the difference, and then that is the previous image, and you can see the difference between the two eyes. So there we go. So that's it. That is Lightroom. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about how to use the software and what everything does. I would recommend just having a play around with everything, as I've been saying. See what all the different tabs do and how they affect your different photos. And hopefully by using Lightroom you can become better photographers and better editors. Have a look at the TechNet page for any more info on Lightroom or any of the other Adobe softwares. If you need more specific details or anything like that, you can see that on the PowerPoint slide there. But yeah, have a look at our TechNet page, have a look at the YouTube, and remember to listen to the podcast. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.